Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share taxi driver horror stories. First story, Northern PA ghost truck. I was just thinking about a very haunted area near where I grew up. I'm often homesick for the mountains and was reminiscing about one of the strangest things I've ever seen. When the old mining cemetery was open and you could drive up, we went there annually at night on Halloween. There's a lot of lore. People seeing full-bodied apparitions and handprints appearing on the windshield if you drive up on a particular foggy night. We took our annual trip up. This was about 2006. I remember it clear as day. My dad's friend was running around with his cigarette, shaking branches to try and scare us. I was tough as nails, and he wasn't going to frighten me as the rest of the kids ran back to the car. I was standing there looking around at the old headstones and taking in the chilly night air. It was perfectly calm, and he walked up behind me, still smoking and carrying on about how he could tell I was my father's daughter. As we were chatting, a white pickup pulled up next to our truck with the cab light on. The cemetery is on a hill, and we were only about 100 feet up the hill, so I could see clearly into the cab. I couldn't see a driver. I said to my dad's friend, "Hey, who's driving that?" He said, "I don't see anyone in the cab." Me neither. My dad's friend looked extremely confused. I yelled down to my friend who was outside the truck to look in the window. How the heck did they pull in? I could see in the cab the entire time because of the light. She looked in, turned completely pale, and jumped in our truck. Both my dad's friend and I ran down the hill, and the truck slowly backed out and went back down the path. Cab light still on. No one visible driving. I jumped in the truck, and she was yelling there was no one in there. Either this was the most elaborate redneck prank ever pulled off, and someone has hid it for 10+ years, or I saw a ghost truck. In our area, news travels fast though, and I'm sure if some redneck rigged a self-driving pickup, it would have been news for days. Second story. I used to work as a taxi driver. One night made me quit. I haven't been well off since past few years, especially post-pandemic. The title is itself pretty much reason to it. I'd worked as a taxi driver for the last 10 years of my humble life, and all the while, I never expected to abandon my adherence in the job. Well, for starters, because for my own good sake. Even if I had no other source of stable income. Last winter, I gave ride to a man who simply asked me to drop him to the vicinity graveyard. And by the last winter, I mean back in 2019, which had the coldest winter of the decade. Needless to say, it was the last day of my job to the ordeal that ensued later that night. It was like any other day of my monotonous schedule, and it was already 6 p.m. I decided to call it a day, up until when my Uber mobile pinged a request for a ride. My body was in no mood to service any ride at that late hour, and the day it had me rather spacing out. But reconsidering my meager earning all told, I thought better of it. Usually, I don't judge or notice my passenger of whom they being or what they look like. That's not my business. But the man implicitly caught my attention right from the start. The man was drunk, probably more than just that. He might have drunk like a fish. And the way he was dressed, I pictured that he might have tripped several times before or possibly even partook in a brawl. Pungent scent of liquor wafted all inside the car as he took the back seat. He outrightly asked me to drive him to the graveyard situated in the town. Though I've driven a few, if not many, drunk people several times before, and their destination always being their home. Undoubtedly, I wasn't expecting to hear graveyard from him. I raised an eyebrow and muttered graveyard in a gesture to what he had just said. He didn't say a word after that. And all the while an accord silence lingered. Now, I wasn't about to argue his business being at graveyard in this freezing night. However, I couldn't help quelling my idle curiosity. I turned down the volume of the radio before I finally asked him. I tried my best to put it simple. The nearest graveyard is 15 Minshew's drive away. Why are you headed there anyway, sir? He kept quiet for a moment longer that I just thought he might have ignored my question in his drunken stupor. Apparently, I sensed he was lost in his tensed and wound-up notions, and sure enough he answered back with disquiet reserved voice, saying that he was there to meet his wife. Before I could take another chance to investigate further of his absurd reply, he let go at once. He begun with a somber tone. My wife's name is Linda. She meets me up at the graveyard every Saturday, as she has promised me since our separation years ago. Our paths of life have split up forever. I wanted, for the life of me, to reunite with her. He went on and on about Linda, and often cursing in between. I thought of it nothing more than rantings of a drunkard. Ignoring him, I focused onwards, as it was a sketchy area. Minutes later, we were almost a turn away from the graveyard. It was a shady corner, and at the time the place was rarely frequented by anyone, to say the least. As we took the turn, I felt an unexpected twinge of apprehension. I kept driving steadily. The night seemed to be at its climax. Complete dark except for the few street lights that did a little help. Everything looked wintry. On top of that, miles and miles of wooded area surrounded the region. No other soul was to be found or seen across the entire length of the road and beyond. The graveyard's facade seemed floating in the darkness, disconnected from the rest of the world. The whole surrounding looked eerie through and through. Upon arriving, I stopped the car in middle of one-lane road, rather than parking its side. At back of my mind, I just want to get the job done and drive home ASAP. Anyways, before I could turn back to him, he told me to wait. He awkwardly disembarked from rear door. Then I saw him disappear in the darkness. I peered outside the window, but to my surprise, he was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps he was too fast for a man to be walking. This was weird, but I brushed it off and lit a cigarette. The radio was silently playing some insipid tune, which I didn't bother to change, though it was soothingly calm inside for a while at least. I continued to wait for the man whilst counting the money earned that day. It wasn't long until I was straddled to the back door, swung open, and heard a voice yell out, "Drive! Get the hell out of here, he's coming for us." The voice belonged to a woman, sounding anxious and out of breath. Shouting of an elderly woman on top of her lungs and making chaos inside the car made me operate on my instincts. I dropped all my money and fumbled with the key, my mind trying to process what was happening. Before I even could start the car, I heard a heart-curdling scream that still haunts me to this day. This I swear. The woman's hands reached from behind, gripping my shoulders nervously, and I felt her nails digging deep into my skin. As soon as engine started, I floored the gas pedal. The cabin jerked as the car picked up speed. What the hell was that? My mind racing. The woman, who looked not less than 60 years, broke into tears and tried saying something, though it was anything but intelligible. Something was behind us. I became certain of it. The 3-cylinder engine was roaring on top of its capacity. Still, I could distinctly hear the footsteps thumping behind the car, undermining the distance between us and the creature it belonged to. Too perplexed, I squinted in the ORVM. In the frigid darkness, I saw an humanoid figure. I could only make out that its limbs were unnaturally long and skinny. This might be a beggar's description, but seconds later, it crystallized into a grotesque figure of diabolical proportions. Within seconds, situation had escalated from quite odd to absolutely terrifying. In one flash of my view, I saw it. I froze. Its skin was pale white from top to bottom. It had slender limbs, and where hands were supposed to be, claws stretched outwards. Its razor-sharp teeth were reminiscent of shark. Lips stretched from ear to ear, smile too wide for its face. Its eyes shone as if a cave-dwelling creature seeing light for the first time. But the face was sickly familiar. My pulse quickened. Holy shit. The same man few moments earlier had been sitting right behind me for the whole damn time. The man was truly just a facade. Dodging all the bushes and boulders with crisp precision, it ran with superhuman agility, all the while looking at me. But his body was facing front. I was transfixed, looking at the phenomenon with my eyes wide open. The woman jolted me from my more or less trance-like state, and the car almost veered off the road. I saw a sharp turn onwards, the one I mentioned earlier. Somehow, it seemed impossible to maneuver the car past it, impossible to outrun from it. The woman shouted something at the creature. It sounded completely gibberish, but she repeatedly blurted the same words over and over again. She was casting some kind of spell. At least that was what I thought in the heat of the moment. It bellowed one last screech which sounded like it had been set forth from the hell's deepest crevices. It reverberated all over around, and suddenly the whole night seemed alive around us. At full tilt, it swinged one of its own claws, shattering the entire right side rear window. The metal door was caved out, sending the metal sheet flying in the inky night, and the other second remainder of the door was hanging precariously. Panic crept ever so much. I shifted the gear and pounded the gas pedal. I stood my ground and kept accelerating. The creature soon disappeared, just as it had appeared before. Maintaining a hell of a speed, seconds later we were out of the red, and soon into the main highway. Nonetheless, I drove with no regard for the speed limit this time. I had never driven a car before as fast as that night. My body was shaking from the adrenaline and my mind racing with questions. The woman obligated to unravel what it all meant. Her name was Linda, and the man certainly was his husband or was used to be. Death of her husband had rendered her psychologically vulnerable. Furthermore, she told how she was responsible for inviting him to this world, because she thought that by doing so she might be with him forever. However, Aftermath was recalcitrant. They kept meeting every now and then at the graveyard. Gradually, she realized it wasn't her husband at all in the first place. It was something else, something that had manipulated her. Years went by, and now it wanted freedom, it wanted a soul. I would have been shocked and incredulous at her explanation, but in my days I refused to believe anything. Past few minutes had defied all logic, and I wanted to brainstorm more questions. My atheist brain was starting to question that God and devil might actually be real. Shortly after, I pulled over to a nearby gas station. Exhausted from the predicament mentally and physically, I took a good deal of time to recollect myself. Finally, I decided to check on Linda, but my heart sunk as she wasn't sitting there anymore like she had just been. To my dismay, Linda was nowhere to be seen. She was gone. Maybe she was in there with me. I sat in, contemplating over things. Part of my brain hoped that it was the product of my tired mind. Without wasting a second, I drove. All I wanted was to reach home quickly as ever. Perhaps it was all I could do to keep myself from going irrevocably insane. Third story. I'm a taxi driver. The other night, I had a passenger I will never forget. We are all cursed and we can't even see it. Our eyes won't show us. I was always under the cocky impression that my taxi and I knew the streets of Berlin like no other. You can't begin to imagine the unexpected horrors I've witnessed during my night shifts. You see, people show far less inhibition when it's dark, and sometimes they even reveal a whole different identity. Still, even my 15 years of experience couldn't have prepared me for this one night. Berlin is quite the adjustment if you come from a small Kurdish village like the one I'm from. I've grown to like my work in this city, but it has its goddamn curse sides, and that's mostly due to the people, peculiar people that might appear friendly and normal during the day, but change entirely as soon as the sun goes down. As a driver, I've learned to observe and notice things, like when I happen to drive a member of some criminal family around. You won't believe how many of those we have in Berlin, but it's not my place to judge. I'm just a driver. I have tons of stories, some sweet and some disgusting, but there's only one night of driving in all these years that has left me sick to my stomach. One that left such a bitter aftertaste that nothing I eat brings me joy anymore. And that's the night I met Julius. When I don't get a call to go pick someone up, I wait in line with the other taxis at the metro station Neukölln. Sometimes I spend hours there, having coffee and a cigarette with other drivers while waiting for passengers. We tell each other superficial stories about our lives and make bets on who will have the best fare of the night. One time I drove a man to a city 200 miles away, made the same money I'd usually get for 3 entire nights. Julius' fare was in a similar price range, even though we never even left Berlin. At the end of the night, I didn't ask him for money. It was a cold and foggy night, typical for the beginning of March. The type of night that you'd rather just spend in bed if you don't have to work like me. I remember thinking that when the passenger door of my taxi suddenly opened from the outside, letting in a cold gust of wind. The cold swiftly disappeared again as this young man with dark hair and just as dark eyes smiled at me. "Are you free for a ride?" he asked. This man could have been 20 or 36. I honestly couldn't say for sure, but I remember vividly how he was radiating something warm and comfortable. He was wearing slacks and a black jacket underneath a nice white shirt. I don't know much about clothes, but I could tell that someone had perfectly tailored this wardrobe to his body. Maybe that's why I believed him when he said this would be a long ride, but that he had enough money to pay for it. Of course, I said yes and asked if he had any luggage I could help him with. Just this, he held up a little wrapped package the size of a book and grinned. "But I'll just put it on my lap." He sat down in the passenger seat. Some people do that, usually the ones that are alone and feel like talking. "Where can I take you to? Do you have an address?" I asked. He fastened his seatbelt. "No, not exactly. I'll just give you the directions as we go if that's all right." And that's what he did. It was fine for me as long as the meter was running. "Dill, that's a nice name," he said after looking at the card I have in the front of the car with my name and number on it. "Thank you," I said while starting the car. "It means heart. It's a dash." I looked behind me to safely leave the line of cars, but froze when I noticed that the cars behind me were gone. And not just the other taxis. Everyone was gone. The entire outside area of the metro station looked deserted. I looked at Julius, but he didn't even seem to notice anything was wrong. He just smiled. For a split second, I swear I saw something moving in the reflection of the window next to him, but when I blinked it was gone. "Art, that's beautiful," he said casually. I swallowed and rubbed my eyes. Another look outside proved to me that I'd been imagining things. There were people with bags rushing to their cars, taxi drivers standing around with a cigarette, drunken teenagers loudly chatting. Everything was normal. It was after 3 a.m. These things happen during night shifts. Your mind gets foggy. I just couldn't let this man notice. I didn't want to lose a fare that would make such good money. Luckily, he was oblivious and continued our conversation. I go by Julius, but I have no clue what that means. We both laughed. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Julius," I said and meant it. We passed one of my taxi driver buddies as we drove off. He tilted his pale face as he watched us drive off with a distraught look in his eyes. I felt a knot in my stomach as I passed him, but didn't yet understand what my gut was trying to say. When there are passengers in my car, I have the occasional chat with them about the weather or the latest football game, but I'm not a talkative man. Some people pour out their souls, but those are the ones I use the least words with. Once in a while, however, I'll meet a special person who doesn't simply talk to fill the silence in the car, but who is genuinely and truly interested in the lives of others. Julius was just like that. Special. "Do you have night shifts often?" he asked as we were driving down a particularly dark road. "Only on weekends. Money's best Friday and Saturday nights," I said. "You must sleep away the rest of your weekend then." He laughed, and I joined in. "Well, sleep is a wonderful thing. There's nothing more comfortable than resting your head on a soft pillow after a long night," I said. "I absolutely agree. If I could sleep forever, I would." He laughed, but it sounded forced. It's ironic, isn't it? We work so hard to earn a living, but as a result, we wind up losing the time to actually go out and live. With all his confidence, there was also a melancholic side to him. His charisma reminded me of my older brother, but in some ways, I also saw myself in him. I sighed. If it were up to me, I'd have a simple life. A small house in a village with a garden. Plant my own veggies and maybe have a couple of chickens. I added to his thought. Julius turned to me with a raised eyebrow. Our eyes met for a second before I had to turn mine back to the street in front of us. His eyes were incredibly dark, as if they only consisted of pupils. I know that sounds creepy, but it wasn't. It felt familiar. Distracted by our conversation, it took me a while to realize that we were driving down roads I'd never seen before. Driving in between multi-story buildings without any lights on. Well, it was the middle of the night, but still. and it felt incredibly strange not to recognize my surroundings. I'm a taxi driver. I always felt like I knew the whole city. Well, something must have happened down that road of yours to end up in the biggest city in Germany then. Julius interrupted my thoughts. I laughed. I'm here because of my family. The village life with chickens isn't for them, I said, surprising myself. I never open up to strangers. No, I never open up to people at all. Oh, Julius called out as he leaned back a little. You're a family man, of course, you're a family man. And we do everything for our family, right? The way he said those words made me feel a little odd for a second, but I shrugged it off. Always. Julius smiled. We interrupted our conversation as we'd arrived at Julius' first destination, a small kiosk where he needed to drop off his mysterious package. I'll be back in a sec. Wait here. He looked at me with a surprisingly intimidating look. If you don't know what a kiosk looks like, it's basically a tiny corner shop. The windows are filled with beer crates and bottles, so you can't see inside too well. I have no idea what happened when Julius was in there, only that after a few minutes, all the lights inside the shop suddenly turned off. That little shop that was the only source of light on this dark street, anyway, now almost disappeared in front of my eyes. I had weirdly trusted this stranger because everything seemed so fine and I'd felt so comfortable. But after he left the car, I got this odd feeling inside. A new sense of paranoia mixed with a rush of anxiety. Something inside of me was shouting to get the hell away. I looked for my phone, but couldn't find it quickly enough. Impulsively, I set my foot on the gas and got ready to leave, but before I could, the back door of my car opened. Julius jumped back inside, with the same friendly smile through those familiar eyes. Except now, he wasn't sitting next to me, but behind me. Where to now, my friend? I nervously asked, hoping he didn't realize that I was just about to take off. I don't know why I didn't simply tell him to F off. For some reason, I couldn't find any courage. I'm glad you call me that. I like for us two to be friends, Dill. He took a deep breath. Just follow the street for now. I started driving, again following the streets as my passenger instructed me. Finally, I felt like I recognized the area again. We were back in Nuckeln. Dill, my friend, let's get back to our family conversation. Do you get along well with your son? I stayed silent for a moment. We used to be closer. Teenagers aren't always easy to deal with. I laughed. Oh yes, teenagers. Things are much better with your daughter, I assume. We were driving down a quiet neighborhood again, with few lights, and I had to really focus on the street. Used to. My daughter, well, she is a wonderful kid, but also a little bit off lately. Not quite herself. Teenager too, I guess dash. I stopped speaking. We've been driving around and talking for so long that it really took me a second to realize what had just happened. I'd never told him that I had a daughter and a son. Oh yes, she's more distant, locking herself up in her room, hardly eating any food anymore. That's unfortunate. You still love them though, am I right? He said. I felt incredibly nervous. I made some big mistake by trusting this man with my thoughts all night. Something was definitely wrong, but I had to try my best to stay collected. He could have some really bad connections. Oh, I have love for my family. But don't we all? I nervously said. No, you don't. Surprised at his sudden change of tone, I looked into the rearview window to make some eye contact. Julius, the man I had been driving around with all night, was gone. I looked into the face of a creature I had never seen before. His dark eyes that felt so kind earlier now looked completely wrong, as if someone had slammed a screwdriver into his eye sockets and filled them with a dark void. There were holes in his face, filled with some kind of fungi. Repulsed by this entirely wrong face, I forgot to watch the street for a moment and almost crashed into a parked car. I swerved just in time, catching my breath and collecting my courage. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would jump out of my chest. It was late at night. I hadn't slept. I didn't have any water for hours. I was hallucinating, I told myself, though at the same time I couldn't bring myself to look in that mirror again. Is something wrong, my friend? He chuckled. I instinctively turned my head around and saw the same Julius with his regular face sitting there, with a smile on his face. Yes, sorry, I mumbled. Long night. Slowly, I tried to collect myself again. What did you do inside that kiosk? I finally asked, surprised at my own sudden courage. Even if that face was a hallucination, but this man still knew things about my children that he shouldn't. He seemed so interested in my life earlier. In reality, he wasn't trying to get any information out of me, though. He already knew everything. What was this man trying to get from me? I had to get rid of him, but be smart about it. So I decided to drive towards the home of my brother. My brother, well, he's an intimidating man with a lot of power. A shady man who doesn't shy away from violence. If this Julius meant danger, he'd know what to do. Julius' eyes were closed. I thought he might even fall asleep, so I quickly changed the direction. I tried to stay confident, but my entire body was shaking at this point. As if he was reading my mind, Julius' eyes opened, and I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this night would ruin the rest of my life. Don't try to be smart, Dill. Julius suddenly spoke with a low voice. I clenched the steering wheel so hard that it looked like the skin on my hands would crack open any second. I know where you're going. Don't. I have no interest in meeting your brother. Not tonight, he spoke. How do you dash? I whispered. I know you saw me. In the mirror. You didn't scream. I like that. You know, I feel like I could be myself around you. He grinned. My eyes went to the rearview mirror. None of it was a hallucination. I don't know how to describe it in better words, but I know for a fact that this thing was not human. It was hiding behind human skin. Now I'm going to be honest, because I do truly enjoy your company. This night wasn't about dropping off the package. That's a different business of mine. Tonight was about getting to know you. A million different thoughts were racing through my mind, but all I asked was, why me? He chuckled again. Well, please don't be worried, my friend. I can feel this entire car shaking. I'm not here to hurt you. This is about your family. It's corrupted. I could smell it on you from miles away. I swallowed. If you're not going to hurt me, what else do you want from me? Julius was smiling at me through the mirror, his mouth revealing a set of rotten teeth. Being what I am, it's lonely. The fact that your family is corrupted isn't a bad thing. You know, maybe you could introduce me to them sometime. We were on an empty road. There were no people around, nobody that I could ask for help, but I still hit the brakes. I felt sick, but not from whiplash. You're wondering whether you should jump out of the car. Wondering if you could outrun me, he sighed. But you won't. I took a deep breath. No, I won't, I whispered. Because you love your family. I nodded. And because you noticed that the eyes of your daughter have recently started to look a little bit like mine, he smiled again, and I stayed frozen. Maybe you should check her reflection, my friend. Are your eyes open? Fourth story. My first day as a taxi driver in Korea. Date, April 2nd, 2017. Location, Daejeon, South Korea. Earnings, approximately $880 when converted from Korean won. I moved to South Korea around a year ago. The main reason for the move was because I had a wife and kid and I was not making enough money. Originally moving to Korea was never an option, but one day my mother and father called me and told me that if I moved to Daejeon, South Korea, they would provide us with an apartment and plane tickets. They would continue to support us until I started to make enough money to support ourselves. When we first got to Korea, I managed to get a job as an editor at a small conference organizing company. The money was not great, but they promised me a raise after working there for a year. When they refused to give me a raise after working there for a year, I packed up my personal belongings and quit the job. I thought I would be able to quickly find another job quickly, but learned that finding a job in Daejeon is almost impossible. 3 days ago, an old coworker of mine contacted me and told me that a local taxi company he started working would be willing to give me a shot. He asked me if I was interested, and without a second of hesitation, I accepted the offer. I know most taxi companies charge an upfront fee to rent the taxi for the night, but the company he worked for was a little different. They just took 20% of your earnings, which meant they were more selective about the people they hired on. But luckily, my ex-coworker, Jong-suk, put in words of praise about my work ethic and told them I was completely fluent in Korean. This morning I woke up, got got dressed, ate a quick breakfast, kissed my wife and baby goodbye, and rushed out to my car. After I typed in the address Jong Suk gave me, I drove the 5-minute distance to the office. I would pick up the taxi cab. When I got there, I took a couple of deep breaths and walked into the building. Everything about the building was dirty. The glass entrance doors were covered with a thin film of dust. The carpet in the office was tan with use, and the lady behind the counter was wearing a shirt that looked like it hadn't been washed for months. Ignoring her stench, I gave her my best smile and gave her name. Without a word, she got off her chair and bent down. She stayed in that position for what seemed like minutes. I started to ask her if she was okay, but she stood back up and handed me a key before telling me the license plate number of the car I was using for the day. I gave her a nod and walked outside with the key in my hand. When I found the car I was going to use, I got a little excited. For the past year, I drove around my mother's 15-year-old car, but seeing the almost brand new Kia K5, Kia Optima in America, I jumped into the driver's seat and started up the engine. After hearing the soft purr of the engine, I started to drive around the city and waited for the dispatcher to give me my first job. Before I got my first job, I saw an old lady standing outside of an E-Mart, our equivalency to a Walmart. I stopped the car, and she slowly got in. She was carrying a small brown bag. When I asked her where she needed to get to, she calmly said, "Drive me around town. Let me relive my memories. I will give you 1 million KRW. Around $880 US. I shrugged my shoulders and started to drive around the city. For the first 2 hours, she was silent. She just looked outside and sighed occasionally. Right as we passed by a movie theater, she yelled out, "Stop." I slammed on the brakes, and she looked at the building before saying, "My old high school used to be here. This is where I first met my husband. He passed away 30 years ago." I tried to think up of what to say back to her, but my thoughts were disrupted by a soft whisper coming from the back seat. I turned around to see if she was trying to tell me something else, but her lips were closed. Yet, the whispering continued. After a couple of seconds, the whispering became a soft-spoken voice, and then to screaming. "My man! My man! My man!" The old woman covered her ears and started to scream at me. I didn't know what she was saying, but I quickly drove away from the movie theater. Once we were out of the parking lot, the voice stopped and the woman was quietly sitting in the back seat again. For the next hour, I drove around the other side of the city. As I started to get comfortable, I felt a hand grab my shoulder. I panicked and stopped the car in the middle of the road and turned around. The old woman said, "Turn around. I will tell you when to stop." I took a U-turn and slowly drove until she told me to stop in front of a pizza restaurant. She pointed at the entrance to the pizza restaurant and said, "My husband was found outside of the restaurant he owned. He was stabbed 12 times. I see it as some sort of bread restaurant now, but he used to create the most wonderful meals. People would come from all over the country to see how good his food really was. No one ever left with a sign of disappointment. That is what made it so surprising." I asked her what happened. She sighed and said, "He was found outside of his restaurant with 12 stab wounds. He was still breathing when the paramedics came and picked him up, but on the way to the hospital, he passed away. They told me that the last thing he said was..." She stopped speaking, but a voice came from right in front of me. "Did you ever eat at my restaurant?" She closed her eyes and slowly took a couple of deep breaths. With a whisper, she said, "I can still smell the meals he created." Scared out of my mind, I started to pull out of the restaurant. Right as I started to exit out of the parking lot, a man's voice screamed out, "Stop." I ignored the voice and drove out of the parking lot as quick as I could. I was done. I didn't care about the money anymore. I tried asking her where she wanted me to drop her off, but she ignored me and continued to stare out the window. Not really having any other option, I started to drive her back to the E-Mart I picked her up at. On the way to E-Mart, she asked, "Can you please just go to one last place? I promise it is the last location." I gave her a half-hearted nod, and she gave me a weak smile before saying, "Take me to Smart City Apartments." I plugged in the address into the GPS and drove, breathed a sigh of relief when I saw that it was only 3 minutes away. 2 minutes later, I stopped in front of a red light. We were just 300 meters away. I turned around to tell the woman we were close by, but the moment I looked at her, I couldn't help it. I threw up all over her. She was looking at me, but her skin started to flake off of her face. I looked away and took a couple of breaths before I tried opening my door. The door wouldn't open. I desperately clicked the unlock button, but the car was jammed shut. The combination of fear and stress overwhelmed me, and I started to scream while punching the steering wheel of the car as hard as I could. In the middle of my fit, the woman grabbed my shoulder. I tried prying her hand off of me, but her hand stayed glued to my shoulder. With a voice filled with desperation, I screamed, "Please, just leave. Don't pay me. I don't care. Just get out." She whispered after I stopped screaming. "We are almost there. I will leave when you get there." I turned around and looked at her one last time. Exposed flesh littered across her face. Bits of her facial bone were exposed, as well as a couple of her teeth. Choking back another fit, I turned towards the road, put the car back into drive, and drove the rest of the way to the apartment. When we got there, I said, "Get out." She said, "Thank you," and I heard the car door open and close. I turned around to see her walk away, but I didn't see anyone there. Instead, I saw the paper bag still lying on the seat. I grabbed it and opened the bag. Inside the bag was a huge wad of cash and a couple of small newspaper clippings of just headlines. Local restaurant owner, Kyung-suk Lee, stabbed to death. Deceased restaurant owner's secret ingredient was human meat. Past lover of the cannibal cook, Kung-eun Kim, found dead outside of old high school. Wife of Kyung-suk Lee, Eun-hae Lee, is responsible for the murders of Kyung-suk Lee and Kang-eun Kim. Eun-hae Lee found dead. Possible suicide. On the last newspaper clipping, I saw in small handwriting. Wait in front of E-Mart in the Dunson area on April 2nd, 2017. There will be a taxi that will pick you up. I tried Jong-suk, but he did not pick up any of my 4 phone calls. The money was nice, but I was still scared out of my mind. I dropped the taxi cab back and informed the woman working at the front desk that there was some throw up in the back seat. She gave me a grin and said, "That usually happens with our first-time drivers. It has been 4 hours since my shift ended." Jong-suk sent me a text 2 hours ago. "I know it's scary right now, but the money is good. You working tomorrow?" I haven't responded back. I don't know what I want to do. The money is good, but seriously, who was I driving around all day? 5th story. When ghosts hail for a taxi. Anywhere in the world you may go, there will be tales about ghosts, and in Japan, spirits of the deceased are called yurei. According to folklore, every human has a soul called the reikon that exits the body upon death. The reikon enters into a sort of purgatory waiting for those of the living, being family or friends, to perform burial rituals, allowing it to pass on to the next realm. However, at times not everything goes right. In events where a person is murdered, killed in an accident or natural disaster, or even not give a proper burial ceremony, the reikon could be consumed by negative emotions such as anger, fear, sorrow, or hatred. In Japanese lore, from this point the reikon returns to this physical realm, transforming into a yurei. This spirit will continue to haunt the earth until laid to rest, or whatever unfinished business it has is resolved. For example, bringing a murderer to justice. The yurei will appear in the general area where it died. According to Japanese myth, if this spirit is allowed to haunt over a period or how powerful its emotions were, could start physically interacting with the living. Often stories from the past depicted how people feared these spirits to exist everywhere. Even in modern Japan, some believe the yurei to be haunting areas, for instance the city of Ishinomaki. In 2011, a tsunami devastated the Japanese coast, killing 16,000 people, including nearly 3,000 Ishinomaki residences. A few years later, with the city being restored and people going on about their lives, an unusual phenomenon started occurring among the local taxi drivers. They all told a similar story where they picked up a passenger in an area of Ishinomaki ravaged by the tsunami. The meter is started, and when the cabbie asked about a destination, the person in back seat disappeared. The taxi drivers reporting these phantom fares believed the ghosts were those who perished in the disaster. These supernatural occurrences were made known by Yuka Kudo, a student of sociology at Tohoku Gakuen University, in her investigation of what first started as rumors. Skeptics have ruled such reports as lies, half-truths, hallucinations, and even mental health issue resulting from the stress of the tsunami. However, despite the rational explanations, certain websites report the encounters with ghost passengers on the rise. Sixth story. I'm a truck driver, and my company has some strange rules. I've been working as a truck driver for well over 10 years now, but I only recently changed companies. I actually would have stayed in my own company, but when my friend Jake told me how much his company paid, I practically begged him to give me a job there. He referred me there, and I got the job after a quick interview. The interview itself was very strange because I was asked some questions I didn't expect, like, have you ever abandoned your vehicle on the road? Are you afraid of the dark? Are you religious? Etc. I answered everything truthfully and got hired right on the spot, so I didn't think twice about the oddity of the questions. My job was to transport dried meat products to a small town, and for some reason, the company said it could only be done at night and that I had to be there by morning. I'm used to night shifts, and the handsome pay more than compensated for it, so I didn't complain. When the time came for my first tour, Jake explained which route I should take to get to my destination, stating the GPS was off a little. Before I entered the truck, he sent a message to my phone and told me to listen to it when I get on the road, since it explained some basic rules I should follow. I thanked him and started driving. When I got on the old road, which Jake told me to take, I opened the message he sent me and realized it was an audio recording from him. Here's what it said. Hey Paul, welcome to the company. Now I know you're an experienced truck driver, but our company has a list of rules you need to strictly follow while you're driving. I'm going to lay them out for you here, and you make sure to follow them as best you can. I'll also send you a text message so you can read the rules in case you aren't sure. Now, first of all, make sure to turn on your high beams and keep them on at all times, since it's really dark on the road. You may notice that even with the lights on, it's really dark, but don't let that concern you. Within the first 10 miles, you may see a dead-end sign ahead. Ignore it and just keep driving. If your lights start flickering by this point, speed up and drive as fast as you can until the flickering stops. You may see an old man hitchhiking by the road at this point. Make sure to stop your vehicle and ask him where he's going. If he says to the nearest town, let him in. If he says anything else, floor it and don't look back. If you do let him in, he will remain quiet for about an hour while you're driving, and then he'll ask you to stop and let him out, despite being in the middle of nowhere. Do what he says, but once he's out, don't look at him while he's walking into the night. You should be well within the 20th mile by now. If you start to hear any banging or growling noises coming from the back of the truck, ignore them. They'll go away faster if you maintain a consistent driving speed. So try to do that. Before you reach the 30th mile, make sure to turn off your radio if it was on until now. Turning it down will not work, so make sure to turn it off. This is really important. By the 35th mile, your radio will suddenly turn on and will be at highest volume. Now it's really important that you pay attention here. If a song plays, any song, simply turn it down or off. But if you only hear static, stop your truck right away, turn off the engine, lie down on the seat, and close your eyes. Try to be as still as possible and keep your eyes closed. You'll hear tapping on the windshield and roof, but you'll be okay as long as you keep your eyes closed. Even if you hear the truck door opening, don't move. Whatever opens them will close them in a few seconds after sniffing around. Once the noises around the truck stop, you can open your eyes slowly and look at your driver's window. If the window is fogged up, wait one more minute. Otherwise, you can sit back up and continue driving. By the 50th mile, you'll start to see something running along your truck on all fours on the side of the road. No matter how fast you go, it will always keep up with your truck, but it's advised you maintain a speed of at least 60 miles per hour. Try to keep your eyes on the road because there's a curve, after which the creature will be gone. If the creature is still following you after the curve, speed up and hope you lose it by the next curve. You only have 3 curves, so make them count. By the 70th mile, your truck will sputter to a halt. Remain as calm as you can and try restarting the engine as fast as you can. Don't look in the rearview mirror at the figures running towards your truck. Just start the engine, and as soon as you do, floor it. You'll notice by mile 80 that it's getting really hot inside the truck. Don't bother with the air condition because it won't work. Try taking off your jacket, but don't open the window under any circumstances. Try not to fall asleep either, because even though the road goes straight, you may find yourself swerving off a cliff if you close your eyes. If you need to use the bathroom, only do it between the 85th and 90th mile, and make sure to keep your high beams on while you're doing it. Do not step off the road or out of the light. When you're done taking a leak, you may see someone move behind your truck just as you turn around. Don't try following them, because you'll just endlessly move around the truck just in time for them to always get behind the next corner, and they want you to stay outside as long as possible. If you hear a high-pitched scream in the distance while you're taking a leak, run back to the truck and floor it. I don't care if you piss your pants, but do not waste a second running back. Regardless of the mileage, at around 3 a.m. your phone will start ringing. Don't answer it, no matter who it is, even me. The caller will try to get you to answer 3 times before sending you a message. Don't open the message, either. Again, whoever it's from, ignore it. By the 100th mile, you may see a pair of beams from other vehicles in the distance moving toward you. If you do, turn off your lights immediately and wait for the other truck to pass by. Once it does, you may turn your lights back on. Repeat for any other oncoming vehicles. Do not honk or do anything to attract their attention. Keep looking in the rearview mirror, and if you see the beams of the truck turning around and coming back towards you, drive away as fast as you can and pray you are faster. Now, when you reach the 120th mile, you'll see a sign for a 20 miles per hour speed limit. Slow down to 20 miles per hour and do not go over that speed, since the sound can attract unwanted attention. You can speed up once you see another sign that tells you the speed limit stops at that point. At around mile 130, you may see a woman waving and asking for your help. Do not slow down and try not to even look at her. Once she's behind you, look in the rearview mirror. If she's still on the road, you're safe. If she's gone, just look straight and don't even think about looking at the passenger's seat, no matter what you see with your peripheral vision. Once you reach 140th mile, you're safe. From here, it's a straight shot to your destination. Don't try to turn your truck around at any point while you're on the road, because you'll end up driving until you're out of gas, and if that happens, you're as good as dead. Don't use your GPS until you reach the town either, because it will take you to an old dirt road, which will have you driving in a loop. Once you reach the client's place, the employees will take care of the rest. Let me know if you have any questions. I listened to the message and laughed, thinking Jake simply wants to prank me. That was before my lights started flickering. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.